When I was 17, everything I thought I knew about my life disappeared overnight. My family, the people I trusted most, the ones who had been my safety net since birth moved 2 states away without so much as a conversation. The only clue they left me was a note, taped carelessly to the kitchen counter, written in their neat, familiar handwriting. "You'll figure it out." I stared at those words for hours, trying to decipher their meaning, trying to find some hidden signal that I wasn't completely abandoned. But there was nothing, just a faint scent of my mother's perfume lingering in the air, like a cruel reminder that life would continue around me while I stood frozen, trapped in disbelief. My phone was left behind, my room untouched, my possessions exactly as I had left them, but the people who had once defined my world were gone. The first night alone was the hardest. I lay in bed listening to the silence, a quiet so absolute that it felt like the walls themselves were pressing down on me. Every creak of the apartment, every hum of the refrigerator, every distant siren outside sounded exaggerated, magnified by the sudden absence of familiar voices. I felt like an intruder in my own life, an actor in a play whose lines I had never learned. I didn't cry at first. I couldn't. I was too shocked, too hollowed out. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, and I drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by dreams of my family just out of reach, waving at me from doorways I could never enter. The next morning brought no relief. The world outside seemed unbearably ordinary. People walked down the streets, talking, laughing, living as if their lives had meaning and direction. I couldn't feel that way anymore. I couldn't move beyond the cold, heavy reality that my family was gone. The thought of taking control of my own life, of being solely responsible for my survival and my choices, was terrifying. I had never imagined a world where I wasn't protected, where no one else would cushion my failures or correct my mistakes. I wandered through the apartment like a ghost, touching the familiar objects of my life as if they might whisper some guidance. My mother's coffee mug still sat on the counter, a thin ring of dried coffee marking the bottom. My father's keys were gone, of course, leaving only a hollow space on the entryway table. I opened drawers, closets, boxes hoping for a message, a phone number, something that would point me in the right direction, but there was nothing. Just emptiness. Eventually, I realized I couldn't stay in that apartment forever. The first decision I had to make was simple but monumental. What would I eat? I stared at the fridge for what felt like hours, debating between cereal and leftover pizza, wondering if I even deserved to feed myself. Hunger finally forced my hand, and I went with the cereal, the familiar crunch, a small comfort in an otherwise alien reality. Eating felt like an act of rebellion, a statement that even though I was abandoned, I could still exist. Days passed in a blur. I had no school, no friends visiting, no one to call or text. I had never realized how much of life was structured around others, how reliant I had been on the routines my family maintained. Suddenly, every task became monumental. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, managing bills. I had no idea where to even begin. I remember staring at the stack of unopened mail, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility that had been thrust upon me. And then the fear set in. Not the kind of fear that comes from a scary story or a shadow in the night, but a deeper, more existential dread. What if no one cared about me? What if this was my life now? The thought of drifting through weeks, months, maybe years without guidance or support made my chest tighten. I began to question everything I had ever believed about security, about trust, about family. The very foundation of my existence felt like it had cracked, leaving me teetering on the edge of an abyss I didn't know how to cross. I decided I couldn't wait for someone to fix this. I needed a plan. I needed to survive, but I had no idea where to start. I was 17. I had no money of my own, no car, and barely enough understanding of the world to navigate it alone. I began by cleaning the apartment, not out of hope, but out of necessity. The mess felt like a mirror of my inner chaos. With each dish washed, each bed made, each surface dusted, I felt a tiny sense of control creeping back into my life. Then I realized I needed money. I dug through drawers and closets, finding a few dollars here and there, but it was nowhere near enough. I remember a part-time job I had applied a month ago at a local grocery store. The manager had never called me back, but in desperation, I decided to show up in person. I walked into that store, nervous and trembling, and asked for a job. The manager looked me up and down and, after a long pause, handed me an application. I filled it out with hands that shook, praying silently that this would be my lifeline. The days at the grocery store were exhausting. I had never worked before, and the physical labor of stocking shelves, bagging groceries, and cleaning spills was brutal. I stumbled at first, dropped items, forgot orders, and felt the judgment of more experienced coworkers. But slowly, I began to adapt. I discovered that I had a stubborn resilience I had never known, an ability to push through discomfort and keep moving even when I wanted to collapse. The job didn't just provide money, it became a source of identity. I was no longer just the kid left behind. I was someone who could contribute, someone who could survive. But survival alone wasn't enough. Loneliness gnawed at me like a persistent shadow. I spent nights sitting on my small balcony, staring at the city lights and listening to the faint hum of life beyond my apartment. I didn't want company, not really, but I wanted to know I wasn't invisible. I started writing letters to my family, knowing they might never read them, pouring my anger, my hurt, and my small victories on a paper. It was a way to keep myself anchored, to remember that I still had a voice, even if no one else heard it. Months passed. I learned how to cook more than just cereal, how to budget my paycheck, how to navigate the world alone. Each challenge, each small triumph, became a proof to myself that I could endure. I wasn't the helpless teenager left behind in an empty apartment anymore. I was something stronger, something forged in the fire of abandonment and necessity. And yet, even as I grew stronger, a question lingered in the back of my mind. Why? Why had they left me? Why had they abandoned the one person who had depended on them entirely? I realized that I might never know the answer, and that was perhaps the cruelest part of all. Life had thrown me into a storm without warning, without explanation, and I had no choice but to navigate it. In the years that followed, I discovered a resilience I never knew existed. I went to college, supported myself with part-time jobs, and built friendships and relationships on my own terms. The absence of my family became a shadow I carried with me, a reminder that life could change in an instant, and that the only person I could truly rely on was myself. Sometimes late at night, I still think about that note on the counter, "You'll figure it out." At first, it felt cruel, but now I understand. They didn't leave me because they didn't care. They left me because life demands that we face our own storms, that we discover the depth of our own courage, that we learn to stand alone and still survive. And I survived. I became someone who could face uncertainty without fear, someone who could confront pain without breaking, someone who could walk into the unknown and trust in their own strength. That apartment, once a prison of despair, became the birthplace of my resilience. That note, once a symbol of abandonment, became a testament to my independence. And as I tell this story now, I realize that the greatest lessons are often born from the moments we feel most powerless. Life will throw us into situations that seem unbearable, that strip us of our support, our security, our certainty. But in those moments, we discover the strength we never knew we had. We learn that survival is not just about existing. It's about growing, adapting, and claiming our own power in a world that often feels indifferent. So if you find yourself abandoned, betrayed, or cast aside, remember this. The world may leave you alone, but you are never truly helpless. The strength to endure, to rise, to thrive, already exists within you. And sometimes, the people we expect to guide us are not the ones who shape our destiny. Sometimes, the person who shapes our destiny is ourselves. Because in the end, it is not what the world gives us that defines us. It is what we do when the world leaves us with nothing.